The rain didn't fall gently that night. It slammed onto the pavement like the world was angry, turning the street into a mirror of broken city lights. At the lonely bus stop, everyone kept their heads down, pretending not to see the girl in the wheelchair shaking under a thin jacket, her hands curled tight like she was holding her breath just to survive. And then a single dad stepped out of the darkness with a soaked backpack on one shoulder, his little boy asleep against his chest. And he did something that made the entire stop go silent. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Because stories like this remind us that one good choice can change a life. His name was Caleb Morgan, a father worn thin by long shifts and longer worries, the kind of man whose eyes carried the weight of bills, grief, and quiet prayers. He'd just gotten off his second job in Cleveland, Ohio, with his 5-year-old son Noah bundled against him, breathing softly in the crook of his neck. Caleb's boots splashed through puddles as he approached the bus stop, already thinking about the last can of soup at home and the broken heater he couldn't afford to fix. But then he saw her. Grace Holloway, maybe 19, sitting still in a wheelchair near the edge of the shelter, her hair damp, her cheeks pale, her gaze fixed somewhere far away like she'd already accepted that help wasn't coming. A small bag sat on the ground beside her, soaked through, and the rain kept sneaking in sideways, licking her bare knees as if it didn't care that she couldn't move away from it. People were there, plenty of them. A business guy checking his phone. A couple huddled under one umbrella. 2 teenagers laughing at something on a screen. They noticed Grace, of course they did. But the kind of noticing that ends with looking away. Caleb felt something twist in his chest, the way it did when he remembered what it felt like to be invisible after Noah's mother passed away and the world kept spinning without mercy. He set Noah down gently on the bench, kept his body between the child and the cold wind, and then crouched in front of Grace as if she mattered as much as anyone else under that shelter. Grace's eyes flickered when she realized he was staying. Up close, Caleb saw the exhaustion in her face, the raw fear underneath her calm expression, the kind of fear that didn't come from rain. It came from being stranded, from being left behind, from realizing you were a problem people didn't want to solve. Her legs were wrapped in a blanket that wasn't nearly thick enough, and her hands trembled so hard her knuckles looked white. Caleb didn't ask questions the way most people did, like he was investigating whether she deserved help. He just looked at the wheelchair's wet tires, at the curb that felt like a wall, at the street where buses splashed past without slowing. He reached into his pocket and counted what he had. Some crumpled bills, a few coins, not even enough for a full grocery run. The practical part of him whispered to keep walking, to save it for Noah, to survive. But the part of him shaped by prayer and pain knew something else. You don't lose by loving someone. You lose by becoming the kind of person who can walk away. Caleb stood, lifted Noah back into his arms, and then did the unthinkable. He grabbed the wheelchair handles, tested the brakes, and with a gentleness that looked almost sacred, he guided Grace out into the rain. People stared like he'd lost his mind. The business guy finally looked up, startled by the sight of a tired father wheeling a soaked girl into the storm. Grace's shoulders tensed, panic tightening her posture as if she was bracing for humiliation, for pity, for some cruel twist. But Caleb didn't stop. He pushed through puddles, his back bending against the wind, his son asleep in his arms, his hands steady on the wheelchair like he'd been meant to do this his whole life. He took her across the street to a small diner still glowing warm and yellow, the kind of place that smelled like coffee and safety. Inside, people turned. A waitress rushed over and Caleb asked for the back booth, the quiet corner, the warmest spot. He didn't speak like a hero. He spoke like a father who understood that comfort was urgent. He ordered hot chocolate for Noah, tea for Grace, and a bowl of soup large enough to send steam into her face like a blessing. Grace tried to hold herself together, but the warmth broke something open in her, and tears slid down her cheeks silently as she stared into the cup like she didn't trust good things anymore. What shocked everyone wasn't just that Caleb helped her. It was what he did next. He took out his old phone and made calls until someone answered. He didn't know Grace's full story, but he could tell she'd been abandoned. Maybe by family, maybe by fate, maybe by both. A diner customer overheard and offered to contact a local church. The waitress called a nearby community outreach center. A truck driver at the counter quietly placed a 20 on the table. The business guy, the same one who ignored her before, stepped up and offered to pay for a ride service that could take her somewhere safe. And all of it started because one exhausted single dad refused to let a girl freeze in the rain while people pretended compassion was someone else's job. Grace finally explained in broken words that an accident months ago had taken her ability to walk, and after her foster placement ended, she'd been moved around like luggage until she ran out of places to go. That night, she'd been dropped off at the wrong stop by a driver who wouldn't help her down the curb. She'd sat there for nearly 2 hours, watching each set of headlights pass, trying not to cry, trying not to beg, trying not to believe she was disposable. Caleb listened with a tight throat, like he was swallowing fire, and he didn't offer empty promises. He offered action. Within an hour, a volunteer from a church shelter arrived with a ramp-equipped van. They brought a warm coat, a dry blanket, and paperwork for a temporary safe stay. The waitress packed extra food. The truck driver handed Grace a folded note with a Bible verse written inside. And Caleb stood in the doorway with Noah waking up against his shoulder, watching as Grace was gently rolled into a vehicle that wouldn't leave her behind. Before the van pulled away, Grace looked back one last time, her eyes shining with the kind of gratitude that doesn't feel like thanks. It feels like being rescued from drowning. Caleb nodded, not like a stranger, but like someone who had just seen God move through ordinary hands. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone you love, and subscribe. Because the world needs more reminders that compassion is still alive. Special request. Before the ending, comment, "I choose kindness," if you believe one good deed can become someone's miracle. And as the rain kept falling over Cleveland, Caleb carried his son home through wet streets and weary shadows, knowing he still had bills to face and pain to fight, but also knowing something else. Sometimes your greatest blessing isn't what you receive, but the moment you become the answer to someone else's prayer.